contraception, and access to military schools, the right to our own credit cards, and all sorts of equal rights over the years. But it all felt different in 2016. Women now made up 50% of the law school population. They were partners at law firms, members of Congress, judges, professors, and 3 of them sat with lifetime tenure on the highest court in the land. Generations of women who had played by the rules and changed American institutions and government were poised to be part of a genuinely equal polity. Sure, there were hiccups and setbacks. Although half of America's law students and lawyers were women made up only 1/3 of attorneys in private practice, 21% of equity partners, and 12% of managing partners, chairs, or CEOs of law firms. Weird. Less than 5% of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies were women, and women made up only about 24% of Congress, 18% of governors, 29% of state legislators. So, okay, it wasn't perfect, but it was progressing. Equal pay was around the corner. Better childcare and leave policies were barreling toward us. And as arguments progressed in whole women's health, it seemed distinctly possible that the last days of men telling women what to do with their freedom and their life choices and their family decisions were dawning. On that bright, freezing March morning, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan tag-teamed their interrogation of Scott Keller, Texas's Solicitor General, as he stutter-stepped through his justification of why, back in 2013, Texas had passed new requirements on clinics and physicians that would effectively close most abortion facilities and prevent women from terminating their pregnancies. These were onerous regulations. In rural areas with clinics shuttered, women were forced to drive for days to access care. Whole swaths of Texas had no accessible clinics remaining at all. Poor women and women of color were hardest hit by the lack of facilities. They had to seek days off from work, sleep in their cars, return for repeat appointments. State lawmakers had argued that their sole interest in the new clinic laws was in protecting women's health, but women's well-being had declined catastrophically. And in court proceedings, Texas could provide no evidence that improving health outcomes was the real reason for the regulations. Pressed on this question at oral argument, Solicitor General Keller could barely finish a sentence. As the 3 women justices, deftly aided by Justice Stephen Breyer, the court's 4th feminist, took turns snacking on Texas's beleaguered lawyer, I witnessed for the first time in my 16-year career as a journalist something amazing. The rules of the Supreme Court road had shifted overnight. Court argument sessions are tightly controlled, highly formalized enterprises that haven't really changed much over 2 centuries, with the exception of COVID-era telephonic sessions. The 9 justices sit at the high bench next to the same spittoons, sipping from the same tall silver milkshake cups they have been using for decades as lawyers make their formal arguments. But on that morning in 2016, the 3 women justices ignored the formal time limits, talking exuberantly over their flummoxed male colleagues. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg at one point essentially instructed the Chief Justice to add extra time to the clock for a female reproductive freedom advocate, and he complied. I described that day of 3 female justices and Justice Breyer going to town on counsel as a, quote, 4-car train of whoop-ass, end quote. Not the usual controlled analysis from the staid justices, but what was exceptional, and at least in retrospect, heartbreaking that morning, was that it afforded America a glimpse of what genuine gender parity or near parity might have meant for future women in powerful American legal institutions. It felt like the end of constitutionally sanctioned mansplaining. It felt, in a way, like the end of history. That morning felt like nothing so much as an explosion of bottled-up judicial girl power that had been 2 centuries in the making. The 5-3 ruling that came down almost 4 months later upheld a woman.